Olivia Hunt thought she had escaped him. Marlene Hunt believed her daughter was finally safe. Elliot Hunt never even saw him coming. And Daniel Sutter, rejected, forgotten, quietly unraveling, was already planning the night he'd make them all pay. What began as a failed relationship would spiral into one of the most disturbing family murders Cedar Falls had ever seen. Why did Daniel target not just Olivia but everyone she loved, and how did he vanish without a trace, taking Olivia with him? This is the chilling story of obsession, betrayal, and revenge, the Hunt family murders. It began like any other ordinary evening in the peaceful suburban town of Cedar Falls, Texas. Rows of identical homes lined quiet streets, their front lawns neatly trimmed and dotted with garden gnomes, American flags, and wind chimes that swayed softly in the breeze. Neighbors smiled politely, children rode bikes in cul-de-sacs, and streetlights flickered on just as the sun dipped below the horizon. No one could have predicted that something so dark was about to unfold behind the white picket perfection of one of those homes. The Hunt family lived in a two-story red brick house at the edge of Oakwood Lane. They were known to be a kind, respectable family, private but pleasant. Marlene Hunt was a dedicated high school teacher who had taught many of the neighborhood kids. Her daughter Olivia was in her second year at the nearby university, majoring in psychology. Olivia was bright, friendly, and beautiful in a quiet, understated way. Her younger brother Elliot was 15 and known for his infectious laugh and obsession with video games. To outsiders, their lives seemed untouched by conflict. They were the kind of family people aspired to become. What no one knew was that something sinister had started to fester just beneath the surface, and it had everything to do with a boy named Daniel Sutter. Daniel had once been Olivia's boyfriend. They had met during her first year of college through a mutual friend. He was older by 3 years, reserved, and had a haunted sort of charm that drew her in at first. To those who knew him casually, he came off as quiet, maybe a little odd, but never dangerous. In the beginning, Olivia had fallen for his intensity. He seemed fascinated by her thoughts, her goals, the way she viewed the world. For a while, that attention had felt flattering, but over time it began to feel suffocating. Daniel didn't handle boundaries well. He texted constantly, got jealous over nothing, and showed up unannounced. Olivia noticed that he had no close friends and rarely spoke about his past. Whenever she tried to create distance, he found ways to pull her back in: guilt, manipulation, dramatic promises to change. Finally, after nearly a year, she ended the relationship. She told her friends he was emotionally unstable and that she needed to get away before things got worse. Most of them agreed it was for the best. For a few weeks, it seemed like the breakup had worked. Olivia focused on school, spent more time with her family, and even began talking to someone new. She blocked Daniel on every platform and ignored his calls. Her mother, Marlene, supported her decision, but she was quietly worried. She had always felt something unsettling about Daniel, though she couldn't explain it. Meanwhile, Daniel's world was unraveling. The breakup wasn't just painful, it was catastrophic. To him, Olivia wasn't just a girlfriend. She was his last tether to a normal life. He began spiraling in silence. He quit his job at a car repair shop without telling anyone, drew from the few acquaintances he had, and spent days alone in his apartment. He became obsessed with watching Olivia's life from a distance. He created fake social media accounts to monitor her, memorized her class schedule, and even started following her car on occasion without being seen. What pushed him over the edge, no one knows for sure. Maybe it was seeing her laugh with someone else. Maybe it was a message he misread on her public profile, or maybe it was something deeper, something that had been lying dormant inside him all along. Whatever it was, by late October, Daniel had come to one chilling conclusion. Olivia hadn't just left him, she had betrayed him. And the people who stood by her, her family, had helped her do it. Rammed up moment, Daniel began to plan, quietly, methodically. not in a burst of rage, but with a cold, focused hatred that grew more powerful each day. And while the town of Cedar Falls carried on with its Halloween decorations and Sunday brunches, no one suspected that a storm was coming. A storm that would rip through the Hunt household and leave nothing but grief in its wake. Daniel Sutter had always been the kind of man people forgot easily. He moved through life like a shadow, never loud, never aggressive, never demanding attention, but beneath that quiet exterior was a mind unraveling in silence. After Olivia ended their relationship, something shifted inside him. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was rejection, humiliation, and a growing belief that he had been wronged. And in Daniel's world, people who wronged him didn't just walk away unpunished. He became a ghost in Olivia's life, unseen but ever present. He knew where she parked her car. He memorized the layout of the Hunt family's home from old social media posts. He hacked into her forgotten college email account, combing through messages for details about her routines and relationships. He even drove by her university library late at night, waiting in his car just to watch her walk out with her books in hand. No one noticed him. No one even knew he was watching. What made it more disturbing was how quiet he stayed. There were no threats, no dramatic outbursts, no attempts to win her back. To anyone else, it would have seemed like Daniel had simply moved on. But in reality, he was plotting. Every day his mind replayed the breakup like a scene from a movie. Each moment distorted until the story twisted in his favor. He wasn't the villain, he was the victim. And Olivia, along with her family, had turned against him. He began writing in a leather-bound notebook, a kind of private manifesto. Each page was more obsessive than the last. He wrote about how Olivia had used him and discarded him, how Marlene had poisoned her against him, and how Elliot was just another smug Hunt who laughed behind his back. The entries started as rants, but over time they became structured, mapped out fantasies of revenge, detailed schedules, lists of supplies. He described ways to make them suffer, to make them feel what he felt, and always at the center of it was Olivia. Around mid-October, Daniel purchased a second-hand revolver at a gun show 2 towns over. No paperwork, no questions. He paid in cash and walked away with the weapon in a plain paper bag. He also bought gloves, duct tape, and a burner phone. The purchases weren't impulsive. They were steps in a carefully calculated plan. He still hadn't decided exactly when to act, but he knew the time was coming. The idea of hurting Olivia directly had begun to lose its appeal. He didn't want her gone. He wanted her to live with the pain, the same kind of pain he had been carrying since the day she left him. That's when the plan evolved. If he couldn't have her, she couldn't have her family. They had become the symbol of everything he had lost. Everything he believed had been stolen from him. In the final week of October, Daniel parked near the Hunt home every night. He watched the lights go off, room by room, noted who came and went, and learned when the house was most vulnerable. On one of those nights, as he sat in the shadows across the street, he saw Marlene open the door to let their dog out. She looked tired. Daniel scribbled in his notebook, "She has no idea what's coming." As Halloween approached, Cedar Falls grew festive. The houses lit up with carved pumpkins and orange string lights. Children talked excitedly about costumes. But Daniel saw none of it. His world was dark, his vision tunneled. He wasn't thinking of candy or trick-or-treaters. He was thinking about the door he'd walk through, the stairs he'd climb, and the silence that would follow after. While Olivia was out one evening with friends, she smiled, thinking the worst of Daniel was behind her. What she didn't know was that he had already picked the date, he had already picked the hour, and he had already decided. No one in that house would be left untouched. The morning of November 8th began with the crisp calm of late autumn. The sun rose slowly over Cedar Falls, casting long golden rays across the neatly spaced homes. Birds chirped in the trees and school buses hummed down the streets. But something was off on Oakwood Lane. The red brick house at the corner, the one with the white shutters and trimmed hedges, remained unusually quiet. No lights, no movement, no signs of life behind the curtains. At 7:45 a.m., Marlene Hunt failed to show up for her first period class at the local high school. She was never late, never missed work without notice. Her colleagues texted her, no answer. They called her phone, straight to voicemail. At first, they chalked it up to a power outage or a minor emergency, but by mid-morning, concerns started to grow. Olivia, too, hadn't responded to texts from her roommate or returned calls from friends who had planned to meet up that day. It was as if the Hunt family had simply vanished overnight. That afternoon, Elliot didn't log into his usual online game session. He and his best friend had a standing appointment every Wednesday, but this time he was a no-show. No messages, no explanations. The friend assumed he had been grounded or had forgotten, but even then, something didn't sit right. It was so unlike Elliot to disappear without a word. A neighbor later reported hearing what she thought were fireworks around 2 a.m., coming from the direction of the Hunt residence. A sharp bang. Then silence. She didn't think much of it at the time. After all, kids occasionally set off firecrackers late at night. But now, in the light of day, that sound seemed more like an omen. It wasn't until early evening that someone finally acted. Marlene's closest friend, who had worked beside her for nearly 15 years, drove to the house. She knocked on the door. No answer. She rang the bell. Nothing. The car was in the driveway. The curtains were drawn. She peered through the windows, her heart beating faster with each passing second. Something felt wrong. The air around the house was too still. She called 911. When officers arrived just after sunset, they found the front door locked but not latched from the inside. There was no sign of forced entry. One officer pushed the door gently. It creaked open slowly, revealing a dim hallway. The scent of iron was faint at first, but unmistakable. The living room was the first discovery. Marlene lay motionless on the carpet near the sofa, her body twisted unnaturally. She had been shot once in the chest at close range. There was no struggle, no time to scream. Elliot was found just feet away, collapsed near the staircase. He had been shot in the back as he tried to run. A video game controller lay beside his hand, the console still blinking with a paused screen. Upstairs, Olivia's bedroom was in chaos, clothes scattered across the floor, drawers pulled open, broken glass on the windowsill. But Olivia was gone. There were no signs of blood in her room, no sign of injury, but also no sign of where she might have gone. Her phone remained on the nightstand. Her purse was still hanging on the back of her chair. Everything pointed to one terrifying conclusion. She had been taken. Panic spread through the neighborhood. News trucks began arriving within the hour, their satellite dishes spinning into position. Headlines blared across the screen. Mother and son found dead in Texas home, college student missing. The image of Olivia's smiling face from her school photo was now plastered on every news broadcast in the state. Police scrambled to find answers. There were no fingerprints, no weapons, no security cameras in the home. Whoever had done this knew exactly how to avoid leaving a trail. It was methodical, calculated, personal. And somewhere out there, Olivia Hunt was alive. But no one knew for how long. As the investigation into the Hunt family murders intensified, fear gripped the town of Cedar Falls. It wasn't just the brutality of the killings that left people shaken, it was the mystery that surrounded Olivia's disappearance. 2 lives had been taken in the dead of night, and one had seemingly vanished without a trace. There was no ransom note, no phone call, no demand. Just silence, the kind that made your skin crawl. Detectives combed through every inch of the Hunt home. They documented each room, tested for DNA, dusted for prints, but the killer had left behind almost nothing. The entry point was unclear. There were no broken locks, no shattered windows. Whoever did it had either been let in or already had access. A forensic team found small traces of soil near the back door, the kind not native to the property. It wasn't much, but it suggested someone had entered from the backyard. In Olivia's room, a drawer had been pulled open and emptied, but nothing seemed to be missing. Her laptop was still there, her textbooks still stacked on the desk. The only thing gone was her... The first real lead came not from the house, but from Marlene's car. In the passenger side door pocket, police found a crumpled envelope with Daniel Sutter's name written on it. Inside was a short, handwritten letter Olivia had composed weeks earlier but apparently never mailed. The words were direct. "Please stop trying to contact me. This isn't healthy for either of us. I need you to move on." It was dated October 20th, just 19 days before the murders. It was enough to make Daniel a person of interest. Investigators pulled his records, searched for recent activity, and visited his apartment complex. When they arrived at his unit, the door was locked. They knocked repeatedly. No answer. The landlord let them in. Inside, the place was silent, clean but unsettling. The refrigerator had been emptied. The furniture was minimal, a mattress on the floor, no decorations, no photographs. In the center of the bedroom was a small desk with a single item on top, a broken bracelet, beaded pink and silver. It matched one Olivia had been seen wearing in several social media photos. There were no signs of Daniel himself. A deeper search of the apartment revealed more disturbing details. Inside a closet, police discovered maps of Cedar Falls and nearby counties, some marked with red X's and penciled-in notes. A burner phone, now deactivated, had logs of outgoing texts to unknown numbers. On the back of one receipt was scribbled a line, "She'll know how it feels to lose everything." Investigators reviewed security footage from surrounding businesses and gas stations. One camera, positioned outside a highway rest stop 20 miles north, captured Daniel's car, a dull gray sedan, leaving town at 3:17 IEN on the morning of the murders. That was the breakthrough. The manhunt began. Police issued a statewide alert, then widened it across state lines. Roadblocks were set up. Tips began to pour in. A few people recognized his face from news reports, claiming to have seen him buying supplies, pumping gas, or sitting alone in diners, but he was always gone before anyone could act. The public was now gripped by two emotions, horror and urgency. Olivia could still be alive, but time was running out. News outlets released interviews with her college friends, pleading for help, praying for her safe return. Photos of Daniel Sutter spread like wildfire, his pale eyes, sunken face, and cold stare becoming symbols of a nightmare that had yet to end. Detectives worked day and night. Every missed call, every piece of surveillance, every inch of the map was analyzed. And yet, Olivia's exact location remained a mystery. It was as if Daniel had vanished into the trees, taking his final secret with him. For 13 days, Olivia Hunt remained missing. Each sunrise brought fresh dread, each night deeper uncertainty. The town of Cedar Falls had shifted from sorrow to fear. News vans still lined the streets and candlelight vigils were held in the park, but beneath the prayers and posters was a growing question that no one wanted to ask out loud. Was Olivia still alive? Leads came in daily, but most turned up nothing. Sightings that led nowhere, abandoned vehicles that weren't Daniel's, voices on the phone that sounded like hers but weren't. Investigators were chasing shadows. Olivia's face was on every screen, her name on every headline, but it was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Then, on the morning of November 21st, a man in rural Arkansas made a call to the local sheriff's office. He had been out hunting near a stretch of dense forest when he noticed something strange. A thin column of smoke rising from a chimney deep in the woods, far from any marked road. It wasn't uncommon to find squatters or isolated cabins in the area, but something about this particular cabin felt off. It hadn't been there the year before. It looked temporary, almost hidden, like it was meant to stay secret. Authorization responded cautiously. The location was remote, with no cell reception, and required a 2-mile hike through uneven terrain. When they finally reached the site, what they found was a small, weathered structure, surrounded by empty food cans, tire tracks, and footprints. There was no power, no visible car, and the door was reinforced from the inside. They knocked. No answer. They knocked again, this time louder, announcing themselves. A single gunshot rang out, not toward them but into the floor. A warning. Backup was called in. With weapons drawn, the team circled the cabin and waited. After 30 minutes of tense silence, a man ran from the back, wild-eyed, unshaven, and barefoot. It was Daniel Sutter. He made it less than 50 feet before being tackled to the ground. He was alone, so it seemed. While Daniel was being restrained and cuffed, officers began clearing the cabin. Inside was a disturbing scene. Walls covered in newspaper clippings about the Hunt murders. Printed photos of Olivia. Some taken from social media, others clearly captured without her knowledge. On a makeshift table sat several spiral notebooks filled with ramblings, countdowns, and chilling phrases like, "She'll see what loss feels like," and "They can't find what they can't hear." But the most disturbing part of all, there was no sign of Olivia, at least not immediately. It was a sharp-eyed officer who noticed that the floorboards near the back wall looked recently disturbed. He tapped on one. It echoed. A hidden panel. Beneath it, a narrow crawl space. Flashlights cut through the darkness as they descended. What they found next sent a wave of shock through the entire team. Curled up in the corner of the cramped space was Olivia Hunt. Pale, frightened, and trembling. Her wrists were bruised, and she could barely lift her head, but she was breathing. Alive. Somehow, against all odds, alive. She had been kept there in darkness, fed just enough to survive, left alone for hours on end, while Daniel monitored news reports and scribbled in his journals above her. He had rigged the cabin with soundproofing materials and told her that if she screamed, no one would come. And she had believed him. Her rescue was the moment the story shifted from tragedy to survival. Olivia was immediately airlifted to a hospital, her condition fragile but stable. She was reunited with what remained of her family, distant relatives, friends who had never stopped hoping. Daniel, meanwhile, refused to speak. He stared blankly at the wall of his holding cell, as if he were already somewhere else, somewhere far beyond reason. But the world had seen enough. The hunt was over. The nightmare, nearly. And the girl, who was never supposed to be found, had finally come home. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every hallway buzzing with reporters and silent, anxious onlookers. Outside, crowds gathered behind barricades, holding signs that read, "Justice for the Hunts," and photos of Olivia with candles and flowers. For a town once defined by its stillness, the Hunt family murders had left a permanent scar, one that reopened the moment Daniel Sutter was brought to trial. Daniel entered wearing an orange prison jumpsuit, his hands cuffed tightly in front of him. His face was emotionless, pale, almost blank. He didn't look at the audience, didn't glance at the prosecutors or the family members seated in the gallery. He only looked straight ahead, as if nothing happening around him applied to him at all. But for Olivia Hunt, now seated just a few feet behind him, everything in that room mattered. Her recovery had been slow. Physically, the injuries healed in time, the bruises faded, the weight returned. But emotionally, the damage ran deep. She had spent 13 days in the dark, isolated, fed scraps, told lies, threatened with silence. She had listened as Daniel moved through the cabin above her, talking to himself, rehearsing things he might say to the world. She had survived every hour by pretending she would eventually be rescued, even when hope was all but gone. When she finally took the stand, the room fell silent. Olivia sat, straight-backed, her voice calm but heavy with pain. She described how Daniel had entered their house the night of the murders through the back door, already wearing gloves and carrying a gun. She had come downstairs to see what was happening and saw him standing over her mother. He said nothing, just stared, then told her to go upstairs and be quiet. When she tried to run, he grabbed her, bound her, dragged her from the house in the dead of night. She didn't know her brother had been killed until much later, when she heard him talking to himself about it in the cabin. Every sentence painted a clearer picture of the mind behind the murders, one not driven by sudden rage, but by a cold, obsessive desire to control. Daniel had meticulously planned the attack. He had studied the family's routines, cut off communication, and timed everything to avoid detection. He hadn't snapped. He had calculated. The prosecution revealed more disturbing evidence, pages from Daniel's journals filled with twisted fantasies, diagrams of the Hunt home, and countdowns written over and over. 11 days left, one read. She'll understand soon, said another. It wasn't revenge, the prosecutor argued. It was ownership. When Olivia chose to live without him, Daniel chose to destroy everything she loved. The defense had little to stand on. They suggested Daniel suffered from untreated mental illness, possibly dissociative episodes, but the evidence was overwhelming. He had been precise, deliberate, and chillingly aware. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. 2 charges of first-degree murder, 1 charge of aggravated kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and possession of an unlicensed firearm. Daniel Sutter was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no reaction as the sentence was read. In the weeks that followed, Olivia tried to return to life. But it would never be the same. The home she once lived in was sold and later torn down. He left Cedar Falls and transferred to a new university under a different name. Her story became the subject of news specials, podcasts, and interviews. But Olivia chose silence more often than speaking. When she did speak, it was to raise awareness about emotional abuse, obsession, and the early signs of controlling behavior. The Hunt family was gone, but Olivia had survived. Not as the girl who was kidnapped or the daughter of a murdered mother, but as the voice of a terrifying truth. Sometimes monsters don't hide in the shadows. Sometimes they sit beside you, whisper promises, and wait patiently for the moment you turn your back. And when they strike, the damage is never just one moment. It lasts forever.